Welcome to the original Gangsters Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Burnstein, and we are going to finish up our coverage of the NBA-Mafia game fixing scandal. Not finish it up in the sense that we're never going to do any content again, but just in terms of this first rush of news, this is going to be our fourth video, our fourth podcast episode dissecting this. So might be getting a little bit redundant, but there's news to report in each one of these, and I want to get them out just so we can keep being in front of the curve like we've proven time and time again here at the OG Pod. We were on top of this story back in the winter, and now the mainstream press is all over it now at the end of the year. So wanted to keep on being at the cutting edge, and I want to report that, like I teased out in the last episode, talking about the drug dealing angle to this investigation, Operation Royal Flush, I'm telling everybody to expect at least two more cases in this investigation to be filed, at least one of them probably by the end of the year, and the other one I would say by the end of the winter. These are two cases that are going to involve different phases of this game fixing scandal. One that we've already been seeing indictments brought regarding, and that's the NBA point spread manipulation, prop bet manipulation. But there hasn't been a NCAA related indictment yet. There's been a ton of reporting about the NCAA and the federal government investigating different college basketball programs, but nothing has, turned into indictment yet. That's going to change. I'm reporting that these two cases, the next two cases to come out of Operation Royal Flush, will come out of Pennsylvania and Florida, respectively. The Philadelphia area, Temple University is at the center of the college basketball one that I believe will be filed in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. And this is one of the, big tells. I mean, I think that when you saw what was going on in Temple in the 2023-24 season, I think that was when this whole conspiracy reached kind of a jump the shark moment where all of a sudden there's a lot of eyes on college basketball. Before it had been, Jonte Porter was getting most of the heat, and he got indicted, I believe, around that time as well. I think this conspiracy went from small college to the NBA, and then back to college at a larger scale in terms of the universities and the programs that were involved. And I'm going to I'm going to break down the list of the universities that we know are being investigated right now. I already said Temple, and we'll get into that in a moment. And then the Florida case, I'm told, will be another layer in the NBA fixing aspect of this. There might be poker game fixes, peppered into both of these busts. I'm not certain, but I would expect the college basketball one coming out of the Philadelphia area fairly shortly, and the newest NBA one to come out of Florida. And like I said, I expect one of these to come by the end of the year, the calendar year here in 2025. So these are the universities that we know are being investigated here, and the NCAA is getting in front of this thing, or at least trying to, after everybody was caught on their heels with this. But I think they're trying to learn from the mistakes the NBA made, and I'll get into that in a moment. But so 8 universities have been named. Another 2 to 4 are on the periphery of that, and then I think there's another 2 dozen that are further down in the horizon. So we know Temple, Arizona State, Mississippi Valley State, New Orleans, North Carolina A&T, Stony Brook, Eastern Michigan, and Longwood. There's also been some rumblings. I said I don't necessarily want to name the other 4 schools that weren't officially named by the NCAA or federal investigators, but these 8 have all been named as, I don't want to say targets, but universities that have popped up on the radar in their respective basketball programs in relation to these fixing allegations. And just in the last couple of days, the NCAA came out and acknowledged Arizona State, Mississippi Valley State, and University of New Orleans, and 6 players amongst those 3 schools that have all been now dismissed from the NCAA banned because of their, according to the NCAA, they found confirmation of point shaving. So whether or not the feds come in and indict these 6 guys, I don't know, but the NCAA is, again, trying to get in front of this, as opposed to what the NBA did, where the NBA was, they were clearing a lot of these players, or some of these players, they were clearing as almost a signal to the government or to the public, nothing to see here, when we knew there was a whole lot to see. And there was this 5-alarm fire that you were standing out in front of, trying to pretend like it was just a little smoke in the kitchen from the stove, when in fact, your whole dining set was being torched, and your living room drapes were engulfed in flames. So, I think the NCAA, at least now, was trying to jump and get in front of this. But back in the winter of 24, like I said, Temple, I think what was going on in that program allegedly, and again, there hasn't been a case yet, but there's been a lot of reporting about the feds in Philadelphia building a case, and I'm here to say that the case is coming soon. The alleged ringleader of that point fixing scandal was Heiser Miller, who was the star point guard. He went by the nickname Fab. So Fab Miller was, just like these other 6 guys, basically kicked out of the NCAA. He transferred from Temple to Virginia Tech, never played any games. I think he's over in Europe right now. He can kiss his NBA career goodbye if he had one. But there were 6 straight games in the winter of 2024 that regulators and betting institutions and NCAA watchdogs were made aware of. 6 consecutive games where the betting on those games were, suspicious activity. One of those games, which was a Temple versus University of Alabama game in March of 24, had a 6-point jump in the spread in a matter of like 24 hours, and that raised a lot of red flags and got the government, I think, hip to at least to some degree, the size and scope of this. And I think it's been a slow burn in how this was discovered, because as I've said before, this was going on for at least 2 years, if not 3 years, at various levels of this conspiracy before the lid was blown off of it. And the lid really got blown off of it back in January, about 10 months ago, when Shane Hennon, the alleged mastermind of this whole thing, shockingly, I mean, Shane Hennon was a nobody, kind of low-life scamster, drug dealer, card mechanic, who got kicked out of a bunch of cities, reinvented himself as a sports gambling influencer and betting tout, and somehow conceived this massive, widespread sports gambling fix involving card fixing to leverage athletes into debt to then have them point shave. And it was coast to coast. It was almost every night. and we're just really starting to scratch beneath the surface. What we know right now is we're really in the infancy of it. But Hennon got arrested, detained last January, and according to his own attorneys, has been in conversations with the government ever since. Even though he's out on bond right now, the government hasn't come forward and accused him of being a witness here. He has a past history of cooperation in a drug case and an assault case that was tied to a alleged fixed poker game back in the 2000s, and a basketball player in Pittsburgh, a college basketball player from Duquesne, Ryan Lambert. But there's going to be a movie about this kid. There's going to be books, television shows. He might never do anything the rest of his life, but this is his crowning achievement. And I guess he's the gift and the curse, because I think it all, started with him, and then it seems to be ending with him, even though there were a lot of dominoes falling before they pulled Hennon off of a plane on his way out of the country on a one-way ticket last January. But, one thing that I think is clear is that if you're doing kind of an autopsy right now, that this was, as I said before, it was a slow burn, and you had small college point shaving going on, I think as early as 21, 22. People start paying attention in 23 when it reaches the NBA and allegations against Jonte Porter and Terry Rozier. But by 24, this whisper had grown to a scream. And if you were paying attention before, there was reporting about all these cases being connected, and that reporting, I think, was from Sports Illustrated and ESPN. They did a really good job on the I would say the macro. I'm getting more into the micro in terms of the mob angle here. But connecting a lot of the dots, we saw a lot of investigations popping up in 24 and maybe at the end of 23 as well, where you'd hear these or you'd read these little blurbs about, suspicious betting activity at this university or that, and it was like there was one, and then there was two, and then there was three, and there was four, and then I'm like, this is not a coincidence. So I think it didn't start with NBA players throwing games. That was where it was headed, but it started at a much smaller level and then got scaled. So I think that's why you're seeing some of these right now, these eight university programs that have been named Division I. They're all Division I college basketball, but there's only two of them in major conferences, Arizona and Temple. But I mentioned this guy's name in the last episode, and he's all over these allegations with some of these smaller schools, especially the ones down south, and that's Vez Fairley, the Mississippi drug kingpin, who's kind of partners in crime allegedly with Shane Hennon. They're both out on $200,000 bond right now. Fairley had his arraignment a couple days ago, but Fairley was allegedly in contact with some of these players at some of these smaller schools. And, this goes to where, some of the seeds were planted here. And I've reported before that Shane Hennon met a lot of athletes and made a lot of contacts in the world of basketball through staging AAU basketball tournaments and summer pro-ams. I'm sure he was fixing those summer basketball games too. I say that half jokingly, but I'm lucky enough to be able to shed perspective on this case, from multiple angles. First, I'm a crime reporter, and I know that landscape very well. I know the Mafia LCM landscape very well. We're bringing in Black Mafia family now because of Spooky Ernest. I know that landscape very well too. So in terms of the crime organized crime angle here, the mob mafia angle, Shane Hennon, I got that covered. But I'm also, because of my background in college basketball recruiting, which was my side gig for like 15 years. I don't do it anymore, but from about 2006, 7 through the pandemic until 21, 22, I was a leading basketball, football recruiting reporter in the Midwest. And I was meeting a lot of people from the world of summer basketball. And I'll tell you, man, it's like in the worlds that I've operated in, Hollywood, basketball recruiting, and the Mafia, in terms of reporting on it, the Mafia ranks third in shadiness. It goes Hollywood's is first, then summer basketball world, AAU basketball world, and then the Mafia in terms of sketchy people. So the world of AAU basketball and shoe companies and brand deals and recruiting kids. Now it's the Wild West with, paying kids is legal now. Back then it wasn't legal until the last handful of years. But I have a lot of contacts in the world of basketball. So I know a lot of people that were running in Shane Hennon circles back in the 2000s, 2010s, when he was cultivating a lot of these contacts. And Vez Fairley was a bridge gap filler, a guy that could introduce him to people that maybe Hennon didn't have access to if it wasn't through Vez Fairley. And they worked hand in hand and kind of complemented each other. But a lot of these players that were on the pad and working for this, in this conspiracy to fix games, were being introduced into the mix by Vez Fairley and vis-a-vis Shane Hennon from Vez Fairley. So I want to say that there are, other, and I've reported this as well, there are other crime families at play here. I talked about Buffalo, I talked about LA. Doesn't mean they're necessarily going to get indicted or anybody connected them to get indicted, but I've heard that they had roles in some of these fixed car games. There's a third crime family that I'm hearing about, and I don't want to name the family because I haven't, confirmed this yet. I've confirmed the other, the rest of my reporting, but I'll say it's a Midwest crime family or a Midwest city, and there's been allegations that these guys are also involved in it and helping move cash back and forth across the country, which is another part of this I don't think is necessarily people aren't paying attention to, is how is the money moving? And then, like say, follow the money. And this was money being generated from New York to LA, from the top of the country down to the bottom of the country, east to west, north to south. And I've heard strip clubs. I've heard, legal gambling operations. I've heard legal drug operations in terms of cannabis businesses that are state legal but not federal legal. I've heard construction companies. So watching how the money flowed in this is going to be an indicator and a way to take the temperature on some of this. I think that there are also going to be a lot more names of pro athletes and coaches that are household names, or that people will immediately recognize, at least people that watch the NBA or watch college basketball. One name, and I don't want to name the person, but I'll describe them, who I expect eventually be indicted in this, is a head coach who has won a world championship, has an NBA title. And I've heard that he's all over this. And so, he's still coaching, and only time will tell. And then there are a couple other NBA teams that I'm hearing are getting glances from the government. One of them being in Florida, and then there being some other ones in the southern region of this country. I think when you're looking at how this conspiracy all came together, I think you have to realize that this thing was so sprawling, this network was so big that not everybody was communicating with each other. You had a couple people that were communicating with everybody, but for the most part, the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing, and the right hand didn't know what the left hand was doing. These were groups around the country that were working hand in hand, and in some cases, they didn't even know the main conspirators. They knew that there was a poker game going on that was fixed, but they didn't know exactly who was fixing it or how the money was getting to them. They just knew that they had a piece of it to a degree. I've been told that these cells were spread out around the country. And if you look at how these, at least, the universities that were named in the NCAA investigation, there are 8 universities, and they're pretty spread out. You got, East Coast in Temple, West Coast in Arizona State, and Longwood, who's out in California. You got the Midwest in Eastern Michigan. You got down south, Mississippi Valley, New Orleans, North Carolina A&T, and then you got out in New York with Stony Brook. So I don't think that's a coincidence either. I heard that there, I would say think more like Al Qaeda than LCN, in that there were people that were part of this operation, that were running this operation, and they were empowering people or trusting people that spoke on their behalf, but they didn't know who those people were speaking to or what they were speaking about. They just collected an envelope or gave their name to be used. So I don't know, and I would doubt that there was a ton of communication between Hennon, who was, I think, running everything boots on the ground wise, and these dozen LCN guys from New York. I'm sure he knew a couple of them, and I've heard some of these guys that were indicted are telling people, I don't know who Shane Hennon is. And they're probably telling the truth, because everything was on a need to know basis. If you didn't need to know, you weren't told. And then this thing is just, I can't overemphasize the tentacles that this thing has. It's going to be the biggest sports gambling scandal we've ever seen. And it's just going to keep getting worse. I mean, this is, we haven't reached the point where we're watching on our televisions or on our phones, hearings on the Hill with congressmen grilling NBA players, NBA coaches, professional gamblers, whoever, Shane Hennon possibly, about how this thing all came to be, because this is going to completely bring the roof down. The roof is caving in on how sports are being wagered on, and the relationships between the leagues and the sports books. This was an epidemic, and I'm not being hyperbolic here. I think that when this all comes up, we lay everything bare, you're going to see this was happening in every conference in terms of college basketball. So many different players could not resist the temptation, whether or not the universities knew or didn't know, whether or not all of it was directly connected or semi-connected. But this was very coordinated. It went on for years, started in small-time college basketball, made its way to the NBA. I think you're going to find out that there were a lot of NBA players, coaches and a lot more college players. And I don't know what the remedy is other than you got to turn the faucet off in some way. And I don't know how you do that, because once you turn it on, it's, once you get the toothpaste out of the tube, it's hard to put back in. But there's just so much access and opportunity for these athletes. And then if you can just compromise them in the slightest, not every, again, just because there's a lot of players in college basketball and in the NBA making a lot of money or doing a lot of, you see college football now, you have, or I should say just college sports in general, you get players that are, signed to contracts, have endorsement deals, are doing commercials. That is the 1%. That doesn't mean that the point guard at Mississippi Valley State has endorsements or has NIL deals. So that's why I think it was easier to get, in bed with some of these smaller college players. I've also heard, and I wanted to leave this to the end because I haven't been able to confirm this, but I'm going to throw it out there. I'm not going to get too granular, but I heard by 2026, this thing could move into college football. We've already heard rumblings about the MMA and fixed matches. I don't think that has anything to do with this, but it's like there's a lot of chatter and noise about the legal gambling and the people in the different sports getting greedy. And I've heard that there's a game last year that was between two top 10 teams. I'll just say down south. I won't give a leak. Two top 10 teams in the southern part of this country, and the FBI is investigating some type of point shave, and the people that they're investigating have links to the people in the NBA college basketball game fixing scandal. So, like I said, this thing's going to get bigger before it tampers down. More shoes are going to be dropping. So, like I said, this is the last one we're going to do for this first shoe drop. It's the fourth video, but I expect I'll be making another podcast addressing this by the end of the year, because I think there'll be another shoe to drop. I'm predicting it will probably be that case in Philadelphia in the college basketball angle to this, which there hasn't been any court cases related to the college basketball fixing. We've heard a lot of rumors, speculation. There's been a lot of investigations, but the NBA game fixing was the case that came down in October. I think the college basketball case is going to hit during the holidays, and then I said there's another NBA case coming, and now the officials are looking into college football now. So this thing is it's just sprawling, and I'm just continually blown away. The more I learn that the scale of this, and I don't want to look like I'm praising Shane Hennon. There's not a lot to praise with that guy, but how he pulled this off, I'll never know. Okay. To go from where he went, where he was 5 years ago, where he was persona non grata, he had money on his head for all intents and purposes. He couldn't step foot back in his hometown, couldn't go to Philadelphia. By the way, Temple, see, here we go, Philadelphia. Hennon was in Philadelphia, got booted out of there, got booted out of Pittsburgh, ends up, again, reinventing himself. But somehow from that reinvention, and then it looks like these fixed car games were going on maybe before the point shaving, and that they kind of, these two things were happening at once, and somebody decided, well, let's use one and parlay it into another, because we know that according to the indictment last month that Chauncey Billups was alleged to be bringing people into fixed car games back in 2019. And my sources say that the NBA college basketball point shaving didn't start until like 21, 22. So again, there's a lot more to learn here. We know far less than what we will know when it's all said and done on this. So wanted to file another report, do another pod on where we stand now, but expect 2 more cases, expect more names of players, mobsters, possibly new crime families. It's coming down the pike, and I'm just here to let everybody know. I'm going to be like, Paul Revere. The feds are coming. The feds are coming. Instead of the British are coming. So, Original Gangsters Podcast, please like, share, and subscribe. We're here every day of the week, whether here at OG Pod, over at the Patreon members only, at our web magazine companion, The Gangster Report, every day breaking down the latest news when it comes to all forms of organized crime, all over North America, whether it be Cosa Nostra and the Mafia, 1% biker clubs, drug kingpins. We got it all for you. The best analysis. We contextualize it at a level you're not going to find in the mainstream news, and we're going to have it before the mainstream news. So please stick with us. I appreciate all the support. Thank you to Benny behind the glass for producing me, and we'll have more content coming out this week here at OG Pod. Scott Burnstein, OG Pod, uncovering the underworld, one city, one region, one country at a time.